I already come to the call thinking, what do you know? I've been doing this for longer than you've been alive, son. So why are you charging me £3,000 a month, Deepak? Come on. They'll classically say, make yourself look older. Right, guys. So one of the biggest things I instantly observe when I meet salespeople is how they think about framing simply by the way that people present themselves when they turn up to a call. And especially in the world of remote sales, the common challenge I see is that people aren't properly thinking about literally their visual presentation. So when it comes to calls, is how is it that you turn up and how is it that you present yourself when you come to a call? So we have touched a little bit on this before, but literally there's a couple of things that we need to think about when you come to calls. So there's the physical presentation side of it. As I look around the room, what you'll notice, which is only true of my setup, is that I am totally middle and center. I have a totally plain background. So therefore I am completely the focus of my screen, and there are no distractions behind me, and no one can make any inferences about where I am and what I'm doing and what I represent. These are all beautiful things because you want to present it all always as neutral, because otherwise people make inferences all the time about you based upon how you turn up to a call. So to run through a couple of examples, I see backgrounds ultimately are not real because Google Meet and all of the platforms allow you to change your background, but that actually implies that there's something to hide if you think about it logically, because everyone wants to see what's behind the curtain. So that's like what area number one, where you often then wonder at a subconscious level, what is it that's going on in someone's background? That's bucket number one. Bucket number two is when I see backgrounds that are blurred, it's the same principle, but without real just cause. Because in the case of, for example, Arian or David or Aiden, I mean, we can see your backgrounds. They're just slightly blurred. So blurring is just nonsensical in my view as an actual tool to use. Blurring actually only is really evident if you have to work in a background that's slightly noisy or slightly, there's a lot of movement. But anyway, in any event, blurred backgrounds aren't ideal. That's bucket number two. Bucket number three is lighting. Is your lighting even across the call? So for an example, in Arian's picture, we see that the window is on one side because of the way the light splashes across his face. So you can see the psychological studies. Beauty is considered to be based upon symmetry. Like if you look at all of the psychological studies, it's about symmetrical faces, symmetry ultimately within things that we design. And therefore, you want to create symmetry within your actual frame as much as possible. So lighting is a big part of it. Okay, that's the next bucket. Let's continue down the line, right? If you're not, like you would be in a camera, like middle, so there's a dot right here within your screen, you're not in the right place of your screen. So you can look at your own camera and you can see, because things that are off center, and I'm going to show you now, just things that are slightly off center tend to annoy people. It's just slightly annoying now, isn't it? You're like, why aren't you just in the middle? Imagine turning up to a classroom and the one kid is sitting on the corner and you're like, but there's no one else here. Why are you there? It's just you and me. So symmetry in all manner is really, really important. Now, interestingly, this also relates to clothing. Sometimes people wear lapels or wear something that's on one side and not the other. We see it with, for example, Lysander's t-shirt. We see one part of it that isn't symmetrical. Same thing with Susruta, because it's actually her hair that's on one side. Anything that distracts you from the person and what they're trying to communicate constitutes distraction. And it separates ultimately what you want to communicate from what's happening. And all you want to communicate is what's happening. So if you just follow that narrative thread, it's quite incredible. Now, it also extends to naming conventions. So when I see the word, for example, business development executive or sales executive, it ultimately implies things that you don't want to add from a sense of distraction. Number one, executive implies lack of seniorship in general, right? People that have experience don't carry titles such as executive in general, number one. Number two, when I see someone who isn't first name, last name, I think you're probably new at the company, or you probably got several different things going on, but there's something that you don't want me to see because now I can't Google you. So most people make these mistakes, and what's incredible is that I can almost certainly say that I've never seen people talk about this in sales training, and I don't know why. So backgrounds, right? If your background isn't also symmetrical, I can't help but notice the background. The thing that I see more than Aiden in his picture is that black board on the left side of his shoulder. You call it the close your eyes, and we talk about this with conversion rate optimization. And when you open them, what is the first thing that you observe within a frame? With Aiden, it'll be the black square. With David, it'll be your headphones, because your headphones create distortion. They interrupt symmetry. Because it's like, okay, I just see your headphones almost before I see you. So there's all of these elements that if you put them together, you'll actually understand now. And it's a similar thing, for example, with Gina. The thing that I see most is the black panel that's to her left shoulder. That might be the door or otherwise. So there's all of these things that we're 100% in control of when it comes to our backgrounds, that the more that you work upon fixing them, the better. When it comes to your clothing, I noticed, for example, that Gina, I think, has a Nike logo on her shoulder strap, which tells me maybe she just came back from a run. Lack of focus. Even if she hasn't just come back from a run, but it looks like she's wearing a sweatshop. Now, you can subconsciously observe all of these things within 5 seconds of coming to a call, because actually we're really well trained to do this because of the thousands of interactions that all humans have. And what it translates to is, just a bit of a feeling that kind of brings you off kilter. Okay, so all of these things we're in 100% control of when it comes to how we turn up to calls, right? Just visually. This is without anyone opening their mouths. And if you carry that down the line, it then translates to whether you're wearing headphones, not wearing headphones. If you're wearing headphones, are you wearing it with like a speaker on the side? All of this just distracts. All of it distracts, right? So in an ideal world, you're able to control all of it. And that's why, as an example, let me just go to find something on YouTube that'll be a good example of it. Okay. Here we go. Symmetry. This is a video that he published 3 days ago. What does he want to promote? Acquisition.com. Look at that. Symmetry. Even, I mean, the nose strap is a nose strap, but face, hair, beard, symmetry, no headphones. He's got one background because it's almost like they're arrows pointing down. So I just can't help but notice this and this. If I close my eyes, these are the two first things that I notice, and then I open them, right? Really interesting when you look at it. Even the lighting is symmetrical, almost. They've done it with intent, okay? So, and this is what we're going to spend, if you're in a remote environment, most of your career doing. So it pays to really think about all of that, because it ultimately does affect how people perceive you when you turn up to a call. Now I'm going to keep going to the next layer, okay? Because there's another layer that's massively important. The biases that people make when you turn up to a call. Now, biases based upon age, ethnicity, gender, background, and what that means for you when you turn up to a call, okay? A good example of it is I turned up to a couple of calls with Aiden, and there was Indians, and I saw the look on their face when I turned up to the call. Like massive profiling in a positive way for me, because I was an Indian coming to the call when they were Indians. And I was like, oh, okay, 50% of the sale has already happened just by me turning up to the call, okay? So there's instances where, of course, it can help you, and there's other instances where it's not going to potentially be in your favor, right? Now, in that instance, it was very visible. Now, there's going to be biases that people will make about you, because if you're white, if you're black, if you're Asian, and you've got to, it would be naive to not think about this going into a conversation. So when you consider all of these things, It's why, for me, you need to do everything that you can do that's in your favor, and you need to make considerations. So, for example, if $7 an hour, I understood that you weren't from India and probably you're from the West somewhere, because I saw your name and I just thought, oh, okay, it's going to be another Indian SEO who's going to give me a fiver service. Now, whether separating people's personal feelings, there's a bias that relates to where you're from that exists, right? So when Aiden turns up to a call filled with Indians, they might look at him and think, oh my God, you're not going to understand me and understand my culture and understand anything about me. And vice versa. Okay. So it's really important that you understand these things, because then you can make adjustments in real time based upon the people that you're talking to. And it's important to be cognizant to it. And there's general frames. So if you're selling to people that are older, what is it that you need to do? If you're selling to people that are younger, how is it that you need to appear? And that's why also having a neutral background is so important, I think, because sometimes you don't know who you're turning up in front of. And you don't want any judgments that you can control before they come to the call. And then also there's general things where you do know, there's general things that you can do if you have a sense of who you're going to sell to or what industry you're selling into. So if, for example, I am going to be selling stuff related to event catering, then I might put food related things for those calls in my background, or event related things in my background. If I'm in the pet relocation space, I might then introduce stuff related to animals, potentially. So there's things that you could do to prime your conversation. And there's also things that, if you're a female, one of the things that's quite commonly spoken of is don't have your hair down, do your hair up, wear glasses, and things like this that could help potentially, depending upon people's preferences, right? Now, whether or not this is about separating people's personal opinions and thinking about the biases that exist in the world, and whether you think that that's something worth adjusting. I leave you to your determination, whether that's something that you want to adjust for, but just being aware that it exists is really important. It also, of course, as we continue down that thread of how you turn up to calls, translates into language, right? There's guys that say bro, there's guys that say sir, and there's guys that don't use any of the above and just call you by your first name. And people adjust based upon age and geography for language. So one of the things that you need to pay attention in terms of how you turn up, within the first 5 seconds, and we talk about this a lot in cold calling, but it relates to any sales call, you need to run an instant cognitive filter to understand the kind of basically background that someone comes from their language, because then you'll have a sense of socioeconomic background, the kind of person they are, by how they turn up to the call as well, right? Because if someone turns up like a hoodie or and a hat versus a suit versus saying, oh, what's up? How you doing, David? You good? David, good afternoon. So tell me a little bit about Pearl Lemon, right? The whole frame changes completely. So being cognizant of all of these things will allow you to make adjustments in real time. But actually it begins by being aware of how you present to a call and what someone might interpret based upon how you are within the first 3 seconds by just looking at you, and be like, okay, I've already run a slight mental model of who I think this person is or who I think this person isn't. Which is why within the corporate environment, they just say wear suits, right? Because actually suits represent neutrality. A suit is worn by both an executive as well as a managing director, because it's that kind of uniform approach, which then allows the way that you communicate to demonstrate kind of your level within an organization. But that's the whole point of kind of the uniforms, to represent ultimately an equal plane. So if you don't start changing these things or being mindful of it a decent degree, you'll be putting yourself in some situations on the back foot without even realizing it, starting from a -1 without even realizing it. And from the sales literature that I've seen, people only talk about this at a very surface level, but they don't run the thread and go all the way through to how it logically plays out. It frustrates me sometimes with the sales literature that I've read, because I'm like, why aren't people talking about this? Because I've experienced all of these biases selling SEO when I was starting by myself, and I've been through these biases and I've walked that line. And perhaps it's also because it's something that's more commonly seen in ethnic minority sales. And I've given sales training to Indians who say, look, I'm struggling to sell to people in the West because I turn up to a call and they hear my accent and they just have this huge bias before I've even said 2 words, or they see my name and they already think, right, there's no way, you're in India. I'm never going to pay you $3,000 a month. Like, why? Right. So that might be why it's not seen. But for the vast majority here, as ethnic minorities, these are biases that you're going to experience. 100%. 100%. Either you're probably already aware of it, or subconsciously you're not. But then actually the inverse, because we get more and more Indian clients, Aiden's going to experience the same challenges when he turns up to a call and he'll be like, well,